public services card will be required by those applying for farm payments, student grants and school buses, as well as passports and driving licences by the end of this year. The IFA has said it's seeking clarification from government on whether the card will be mandatory to access EU farm payments. Recently, the Minister for Social Protection, Regina Doherty, confirmed that the card is mandatory for those receiving social welfare payments. Some people have not received benefits as they've refused to sign up for the card. Critics of the scheme say the government is introducing a national ID card by stealth, which will enable a huge amount of data about people to be held and shared across government departments. David Quillinan from Cork City hasn't received his Job Seekers Allowance for 6 months after refusing to provide a photograph for the public services card.
Late last year, started receiving letters asking me to appear basically at a local office and submit a digital photograph, was really how they put it. The situation went on. I kept getting letters out. I kept turning up at the office. I refused to give them the digital photograph, as they call it. Basically asked for an alternative, prepared to supply all the usual documentation in relation to proving my identity, but that wasn't good enough for them. Then they sent me out a letter saying that my payments would be suspended from the 15th of February. My payments have been suspended nearly 6 months, or over 6 months now.
Can you explain what is it about the card and the photograph in the card that you have concerns about?
I mean, I've been aware of this whole sort of biometric and facial imaging thing a long time. Never liked the idea. I'm just not sure how it will all link up in the end. When stuff is stored on computer, you can't really, in this day and age, you can't really give any guarantee of security.
You haven't received benefits since February of this year?
Since February, yeah.
Have you counted up how much that would be?
Roughly 4,000, possibly. Something around that kind of figure. Really, the only reason that I've been able to take a stand is that I had some savings aside. I know for a fact that there's a lot more people that feel the same about this card, but they wouldn't be in a position to object.
Siobhan Quinlivan from Galway is another person raising objections to the card. She's been told the child benefit for her daughter will be stopped within 60 days if she refuses to obtain a public services card.
I'm not receiving of any other payment or any other form of payment from the Department of Social Welfare, so I had no idea that this was even happening in the background. And then one day I just got a letter to the post with an appointment date saying to turn up with the following documentation, and I chose not to turn up to that meeting, and I informed them that I wouldn't be turning up. I suppose was concerned, what is this card about? I didn't know enough. I didn't feel I knew enough about the card. I didn't feel that I was getting the information I wanted. And then I started to investigate it a bit, and I got more and more concerned. I wasn't clear what information was going to be stored, who was going to have access to that information. And none of those questions have been answered satisfactorily for me. So I received a letter on the 4th of August saying that urgent, I will lose my child benefit if I don't register for a public services card within 60 days. And I particularly object to it on this basis because child benefit is for the benefit of the child. Well, my concern is that they want me to provide my personal details, effectively compromise, which is what my concern is, my privacy, so that my child can receive her benefit.
What do you say, Siobhan, to Minister Regina Doherty, the Minister for Social Protection, who says that it's not too much to ask people to authenticate their identity to access a high-value public service?
My passport should be authentication enough. It's a government document. It's accepted worldwide. I don't think it's too much that my own country would accept that passport as a form of identification. I feel that they're bullying, I feel that they're unfair, and I think that the way they've gone about it has been entirely underhanded. And what am I going to do in 30 days? I really don't know. And that's the honest to God answer, I just don't know.
We did ask Pat Breen, the Minister of State with responsibility for data protection, to come on the programme to talk to us last week and again for this morning, but he's not available. How many people have had their benefits cut because they refused to register for the card?
Well, again, not to be smart, the Controller and Auditor's General report doesn't specifically say or give that figure as a result of people not issuing the card. And we don't hold the data of people who haven't come in for the card as opposed to not getting their services. What we're trying to do is to encourage all of the public sector services users to apply for the card, to come in. We're being as flexible as possibly can by giving appointments, and in some intro offices there's walk-in appointments, to come in with your photograph, to get your photograph taken, give your signature, your PPS number and your proof of where you live, so that you can go through that safe authentication process, so that you can prove just once that you are who you are, so that then you can use, that stored data to get more efficient public services.
There are people listening, Minister, many of whom have already, we'll say, verified their ID to various different government departments over the years using, for example, a passport or a driver's licence, who will feel, well, why do I need to do this again? I already have a passport. Is that not good enough?
Well, obviously we want to ensure and improve the services, and I think what's very important from any particular state is to ensure that the services are going to the people that they're supposed to go to. And in order to do that, then the verification process or the authentication process is obviously going to change. Now, as I said to you, it was introduced in 2005 that we would have a new standard across all public bodies. It took that standard until 2011 to be introduced, and 2013 to be verified and to modified into legislation. So I think it's fair that as times change, that systems improve. The current standard that we're using is called SAFE. It's where you come in and to the highest level of authentication, we can ensure that you are who you say you are on a once-off basis, so that you are now registered in the public services system. You'll never have to give that information again, so that when you access other public services, we already have that ID data set, and it should make you accessing the services more efficiently. And I think, to be fair, it was rolled out for first time passport applications earlier on this year. To be fair, the passport is an exceptionally valuable document, and I don't think it's unreasonable for us to make sure that the people who are applying for passports are who they say they are, and that's why we have this new standard.
As we heard, the Minister for Social Protection, Regina Doherty, has launched a staunch defence of the public services card on Morning Ireland earlier. But for many people, there are still unanswered questions about the card itself and what it's required for, and if it's going to be mandatory in future for claiming farm grants, student grants and other services on the line. What do you say, Joan Burton, as a former Minister for Social Protection, about the case of an elderly woman, as reported, being denied her pension because she wasn't prepared to sign up for this card?
Well, obviously that particular case is a matter for the current minister, and it is for the minister to address that. But in all honesty,
hold on, you're the minister in office who brought in this card, which this woman objects to.
And in fact, we had nothing but cooperation from senior citizens. By the way, we also discovered, and this is also important, and I'm sure TJ will agree with this, in the current development of IT, identity theft is a very, very serious
problem. Hold on, now
problem.
you're going on a bit of a detour. Can you just deal with the question of the woman who was refused a pension because she objected in principle to signing up for this card?
Well, I think that's a matter for the minister to address, and I think.
Well, how would you have handled it?
Well, I think first of all, I don't know the background in detail to the particular.
The woman
case.
just wouldn't sign up for the card. What would you do if you were the minister?
Well, I think you would have officials in the department have a discussion with her, talk to her and see if her issues can be addressed. I don't want to comment on the case because I don't know the background detail, and all I know from my experience as Minister for Social Protection is literally every case is different, so I don't want to make a general comment that could be in some way unfair to the minister or unfair to the officials or in particularly to
it
the
sounds from
woman.
what you're saying
sit
is
down
though
and talk to her.
Yeah, but if she's not prepared to do it, you're basically saying, look, make her do it.
Hello?
Yes, I'm saying your position seems to be, can you hear us still? Are you still hearing us, Joan Burton?
I am now, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. You seem to be taking a view that, look, the civil servants will just find a way to make her sign up for it.
Not particularly. I think whatever issues the woman has to be examined and addressed. I'm just not going to make a judgment on it. But by literally finding out what the actual detailed situation was and what the facts in the case were.
The detailed situation is she just does not want to sign up for one of these cards.
Well, that's if I may say so, that's for the woman herself to explain to the officials. I'm just not going to make a judgment on it. But what I would say is that a huge number of retired people have the card. They use it in particular in the context of the free travel pass, and it has been an enormous success.
Is that de facto this has become a compulsory item. This is something you have to function in society. Now, Regina Doherty has said that this is mandatory but not compulsory, which is a type of Jesuitical hair splitting that I think is a credit to her understanding of philosophy. But I think for the rest of us, it doesn't reflect the reality of the situation, which is that if you can't receive your pension with it, if you can't get a driving licence without it, if you can't get a passport with it, it is effectively compulsory. It is becoming a national ID card without any legal basis, sidestepping any oversight by the Oireachtas.
But isn't
there public debate about that?
Isn't there great merit in just having the convenience of being able to establish who you are with such a range of, if you like, authorities who can dispense a service, be it a passport or be it a pension or whatever? I mean, what's wrong with the idea if the necessary legislation is put in place?
Well, I love the idea, Sean, but that's not the reality. So you mentioned passports, for example. Wouldn't it be great if you could just show your public services card to get a passport? In fact, the Department of Foreign Affairs, even though it insists on you having a public service card to get a new passport, doesn't trust the public service card. You still have to go in front of the Garda and verify your identity in the old-fashioned way. What's happened here is that the public services card has become a sort of window dressing layered on top of the existing process. You still have to fill out paper forms. You still have to take the old-fashioned passport photographs. You still have to go into the Garda station. There's no streamlining here. It's just an additional cost. This is something that's cost €60 million or thereabouts to date, and we really haven't seen a return on that investment in terms of efficiency or in terms of, for example, prevention of fraud. And well, can I go back a little bit and talk about that case of the pensioner, because I think it illustrates a very significant problem. There's two real concerns here. One is that the legislation doesn't say that public service cards are mandatory to get benefits, including pensions. The legislation says the minister may use them to verify identity, but it doesn't say it's the only way in which you may verify somebody's identity. So if an elderly woman is being bullied into getting a public services card, when there are other equally good ways of authenticating her identity, such as a passport, that is fundamentally unlawful. The minister can't adopt a blanket policy. The minister can't fetter her discretion in this way by saying we're only going to take this one form of identification.
So you're saying there's no legal basis for denying this lady in her 70s a pension on the basis of her refusal to sign up for this card?
Where a minister is given a discretion, such as a discretion to verify identity in one way, that's a discretion that has to be exercised reasonably and proportionately and lawfully. And where the minister has a discretion to use a different means of authentication, such as a passport, they can't fetter their discretion. They can't adopt a blanket policy which says we're only going to take this card. That's the first problem. The second problem is, well, why have they adopted this blanket policy? I think part of the problem here, and the reason we're seeing it come to light now, is that the government has signed up to a deal with the providers of the cards, whereby there's a target of 3 million cards to be issued by the end of this year. In essence, if the government doesn't get 3 million cards out the door by the end of the year, the government has to pay for 3 million cards regardless. And it appears to me that there is something of a mad push on at the moment to get as many people signed up for cards as possible to hit that target, without regard to the questions of proportionality or indeed legality of doing so.
Is there a need, in your view, for fresh legislation, if you're saying there's no legislative basis for denying somebody a pension on the grounds that he or she is refusing to sign up for one of these cards?
I think you're absolutely right in that regard. So there really is not a legal basis for a blanket policy which says we're going to deny people certain types of benefits, for example, if they don't sign up for the card. That's not what legislation says. Equally, there's a need under European law for specific legislation about sharing this information with other state agencies and with the private sector in some cases. Again, we don't have that at the moment. But in a wider sense, I think it's important to step back a little bit and ask, where is the public debate about this issue generally? The reason we're concerned about this is that it's taken on the status of effectively an ID card. It's taken on the nature of being effectively compulsory for everybody living in Ireland if you want to engage in day-to-day activities, but without any public debate, without any, on the basis of a creeping expansion. Bear in mind that when the card was introduced first, it was a simple piece of plastic, no chip, no photograph. It's gradually acquired all these characteristics since. And I think most fundamentally we're saying that if this is to be done, we need a proper public debate about it. We need to look at the experience of ID cards in other countries and see what we can learn from the safeguards they put in place. And this is something that has to be done by our elected representatives in the Oireachtas, not as a series of creeping administrative measures.
I suspect we'll hear a lot more about this when the Dáil reconvenes in a couple of weeks' time. My thanks to TJ McIntyre, Chair. Do you support the idea of refusing a pension to somebody who refuses to sign up for one of these cards?
Well, I don't like talking about that particular case because I don't know enough about it, Sean, is the first thing. And secondly, as with all of these situations, there's two sides, and there's probably a third side possibly as well to these stories. I mean, I think I saw somewhere that case was going on for 2 years. I mean, if a department official is not satisfied that somebody is engaging, I know your previous contributor was talking about they can give a passport, but I mean, maybe that person refused all forms of identity. We don't know that. I mean,
okay. Well, look, you are, as I say, Minister of State at the Department of Health with special responsibility for mental health and older people.